this is Greg Troutwine with Offshore Engineer TV, and we're very pleased to be joined again by Jim McCaul, the Managing Director of International Maritime Associates and World Energy Reports, to discuss the rapid resurgence of the offshore deepwater market and the implications for contracting in the coming 18 months. Jim, you've been following the floating production market closely for more than 30 years. When you look at deepwater oil and gas today, what do you see?
The deepwater market over the last 30 years has gone through a number of dips, some major. The major of all dips has been over the last 5 years or so. It was horrendous. It basically put a lot of these companies into big financial problems. A number of companies went bankrupt. The activity simply dried up, and it was a pretty awful situation. We're in a rebound now. I basically see this market rebounding very quickly, as I'll describe a little bit further in this conversation. But the market right now is in a rebound phase. It's accelerating, and it's accelerating faster than I expected 6 months ago.
Obviously, you've been producing an annual report on this market for many years and offering a 5-year projection. Now, I'm going to assume that this 5-year projection has changed for the positive in the past 6 months or so. What has been the impetus for this change?
Well, as you say, we do these reports on floating production systems. I've been doing them now for 25 years and follow the market pretty closely. The last one we finished was just yesterday, and we've been working on it for the last couple of weeks. And what we found is as I said a few minutes ago, the market is accelerating, and the activity is picking up more quickly than we expected. What's happened is the oil market itself is, of course, what drives everything that takes place in deep water. And the oil market has improved substantially. The inventory glut that was created back a year, 2 years ago, well, in 2020, it was a huge glut of oil on the market. And of course, oil glut drives prices down. And that glut has been not only eliminated, but in this country now, the inventory is actually below the seasonal average for this time of year. This is only within the last month or two. Price of oil has gone up. It got below $10 at one point last year, and now it's back up to the upper 60s. It almost crashed 70 back in the middle of May. It's trading today around $68. And more importantly, the deep water E&D activity has been rebounding. I've talked to and I've met with a few of the drilling contractors and seismic contractors, some of the big service contractors, and not all of them, but many of them are now reporting, optimism for the next 6 months, 12 months. They see the market improving in E&D. And E&D is the leading indicator for floating production. I mean, you have to explore and develop before you can produce. And if the E&D market is improving rapidly, then floating production will follow.
Given the rebound in the market, what are your projections in terms of the number of units and the cumulative investment value for the FBSO and production semi market in the near term?
Well, we looked specifically at that, and we went through our database, and again, I talked to a number of operators to confirm the information. And what we found is that there are almost 24 projects involving either an FPSO or a production semi that are lined up for an investment decision within the next 18 months. In other words, between now and the end of next year. This is a pretty big figure. And back in 6 months ago, when we looked at the market, our estimate of what would come in the near term was much lower than that. We saw about a dozen or so orders in 21, 22, certainly not 24. But the market has just rapidly changed, and these projects that we're talking about, actually there's 23 projects specifically that are lined up, and those 23 projects will generate a capital expenditure on the floating production system of around $35 to $40 billion. And again, that's a much higher figure than we had 6 months ago.
Jim, I know you've talked about some of the changes. Is that all that's changed in the last 6 months?
Well, what's really taken place is 6 months ago when we did the forecast, the virus was spreading globally. There was no vaccine on the market at that point. The global economy was sputtering, and basically everybody was looking at the future very pessimistically. This has all changed. The vaccine's available. It seems to be working very well here in this country, and it's going to be available elsewhere. And I think everyone is looking far more optimistically at the future. The oil market certainly is more optimistic.
So, Jim, during our recent discussions, you noted an interesting aspect to the new forecast in the inclusion of several small marginal FPSO projects in the near-term pipeline. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, this to me is very interesting, and it's still in the developing stage. I'm not totally clear as to whether these projects are really firm or not, but there's been a number of opportunistic, marginal, small projects that have come into play that look like they could advance within the next 12 to 18 months. These are projects that typically occur when the market is buoyant, when prices of oil are up, and companies want to take advantage of a quick dip in the well and try to sell the oil quickly. So we've seen projects. There's one in, for example, Timor-Leste, which is called Buffalo. It's a very small project. That looks like it's going to advance. There's another one in Nigeria called Aquac, which I've been following for some time, but I've never really thought much about because it's always difficult to get financing for these types of projects. Well, it looks to me like Aquac could actually move forward now with the price of oil going up the way it is. So I find this interesting. It's not just the very big, long-lived projects like the ones in Guyana or Brazil. Now we're seeing smaller ones. Sort of brings us back to the days in the late 1990s where loads of small projects involving FPSOs were being put into play.
You've been engaged in this market in your database for nearly 3 decades. For those watching who are not familiar, can you just give a snapshot of what they can find in the database?
Well, it includes about 650 projects worldwide. Some are being planned, some are in operation, the units are being built, the units have been built and are now available. It's about 650 altogether, and it's an online database that's fully searchable. It's actually quite useful. We have a number of customers, a number of the major offshore operators are customers, along with a number of the offshore contractors, and we get feedback that indicates that it's quite useful. The information is right up to date as of the day you look at it, keep it going, and the information comes directly from companies, and we try to keep it as accurate as possible.
Okay. Again, Jim, thank you for your time. I look forward to visiting with you again in about a month's time.
All right, thank you, Greg.